The Arenano family's life was always filled with arguments and displeasures. Marco Arenas was a spoiled child and perhaps even overprotected. Walter Arenas Navarro and Maria Rosas Castillo were concerned about giving him the best life and of course the best and most prestigious education. However, when the little one became a man, he was not the good, responsible, and grateful son they dreamed of. Despite the disappointment, the love of parents for their only son was stronger, and even though he made many mistakes, they still loved him unconditionally. What they obviously did not expect was for Marco to repay all their love and care in the worst way possible. And it all happened in the district of La Molina in Lima on November 5th of the year 2013, when Marco, 22 years old, and his girlfriend, Fernanda Lora, 18, became the protagonists of the most macabre and bloody movie you can imagine. A love that led him down the paths of ambition, extravagance, greed, and finally to the worst of scenarios. But how did Marco Arenas and Fernanda Lora meet? Was their love actually a dangerous obsession? What led a boy who had everything to take the life of the one who loved him unconditionally? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you in this video. But first, let me tell you the story.
Marco was born into a wealthy family that gave him a high quality of life.
He was a spoiled child, although for many he was overly protected, which caused his parents to fulfill all his whims without protest. As the years went by, this would become a serious problem. However, there were nothing more than some arguments over insignificant things like any child his age would have. Similarly, Walter Arenas and Maria Rosa Castillo enrolled their son in one of the best and most exclusive schools in Lima. But when high school ended, the fruits of this upbringing were amplified in the blink of an eye. Marco started studying industrial engineering at the private University of Lima. But contrary to his parents' expectations, the young man failed 6 of the 7 courses he was taking and had to drop out. He practically failed everything. Seeing the disappointment on their son's face, his parents did not hesitate to enroll him in a new university. This time, it would be San Ignacio de Loyola, where he studied business psychology. Their parents' hopes were once again shattered in the same way. And that's because Marco also dropped out of school, a disappointing end for the parents. Imagine that. However, not for the young man, because there he met who would be the love of his life and with whom everything would be a downfall. She was Fernanda Lora Paz, a 17-year-old teenager who was in her first cycle of psychology studies, who came into his life like a direct arrow to his heart. In February 2013, 9 months before the events, they started dating. They say opposites attract, but not only that, because criminal minds also come together like an inseparable magnet.
The young woman, a role model in her community, was in her first year of psychology at San Ignacio de Loyola University. She is the eldest of 4.
There was a lot of chemistry between them. She liked the money that Marco had, as well as his vehicle that he used to take her everywhere, and he enjoyed the great adventures and hobbies he liked to do with Fernanda. Although months later that supposed love, in quotes, began to go astray down the paths of ambition, waste, and greed, ending with the life of Maria Rosa Castillo, Marco's mother.
You tried to disguise everything as if nothing had happened.
What has happened, Marco? What has happened?
What has happened? What?
What has happened, Marco? What's wrong with you? Why are you so cynical? What cynicism? What about today? Why are you so cynical? But cynical about what? Why do you speak ill of people?
Oh, Fernanda.
Why do you have to speak ill?
But before that bloody decision came, Marco had started stealing money from his parents in order to continue squandering on tastes and whims that he shared with his partner. He took the money from drawers, wallets, and even through bank cards. However, this was not the only crime the young man committed and were indications of how everything was going to end. The couple also enjoyed killing birds and knocking nests from trees, which they say is very common for killers to first mistreat small animals before taking human lives. In addition, with the van that Marco was driving, he would throw eggs at passers-by, something they loved. Seeing others suffer seemed to be their greatest amusement, and when they couldn't see each other for some reason, he would kill time watching horror movies or playing violent games like Hitman, where the protagonist enjoyed virtually strangling his victim, as if Marco was practicing to someday reproduce it himself.
Fernandita.
I miss you a lot, my love.
I love you, my love, but... All this malice increased when in August of the same year, Fernanda came of age and they both wanted to celebrate her birthday in a big way.
She is 18 years old. She just turned 18 2 months ago. She is a girl who is innocent, who knew nothing.
Their idea was to start living together but far from Peru and away from the disapproving gaze of their parents. They couldn't come up with a better idea than to fake Marco's kidnapping to finance this dream. Marco himself contacted his parents and asked them for $15,000 for his supposed ransom. Desperate for their only child to no longer be in danger, they deposited the money. The criminals went to Chile with the loot without even showing signs of life. For Marco's parents, he was missing. Then, on August 27th, the parents filed a report for the disappearance of the two. Distressed by not knowing anything about them, days later they finally got news. It turns out the father was able to communicate with Marco through Facebook. But instead of apologizing, he warned them that they had run out of money and needed them to send plane tickets if they wanted him to return to Lima just like that, shamelessly. The parents, now completely backed into a corner, totally controlled, did not hesitate to bring them back. Upon his return, they forgave him in the hope that he would regret his actions and thus make amends for his mistakes. As expected, that never happened. Marco didn't have an ounce of compassion for his parents. He didn't care. In this way, upon returning to his native country, the man continued to waste his parents' money. His girlfriend found the young man's attitude strange. For her part, she continued to enjoy her boyfriend's money at the expense of his parents, but both were about to climb several steps to a point of no return. Stealing money no longer seemed enough. They needed more. Not knowing what to do with Marco's messy life because
He seemed unstoppable.
his parents tried with the wake-up call, but the punishments were not enough, and he even mocked them, doing whatever he wanted with his life and the money that did not belong to him. Until Tuesday, November 5th of 2013 came, when they verbally reprimanded him again, and Marco ended up getting into his truck and leaving full of anger, of fury, to the university to pick up Fernanda and tell her how supposedly bad his parents were when all they wanted was for their beloved and only son to be a decent person and simply a good guy. Being together.
They returned to his house, obviously obsessive on the part of both, and in that way they felt reinforced. They felt that one was with the other. They felt they were being loyal to themselves as well.
Being together, they returned to his house in the Sol de la Molina urbanization they entered, annoyed, and locked themselves in his room. Apparently, he already had the plan in mind. At that moment, his father was no longer in the house. So Marco told Fernanda to wait for him outside and go to his mother's room to supposedly ask for her forgiveness. Taking advantage of the woman's innocence, Marco approached his mom, making her believe that he was going to give her a kiss, but he surprised her in the least expected way, and that is, wrapped his arm around her thin and fragile neck and squeezed it for several seconds, cutting off her breath. His mother fought with all her strength, but he was stronger, much stronger, and she couldn't prevent herself from fainting. Like a psychopath and morbid, on the other hand, Fernanda watched all the actions of her bloodthirsty boyfriend from the window without doing anything to prevent it. Thinking she was dead, they both took the body and put it in the trunk of the van, a Toyota. Leaving their unconscious mother in the car, they returned home and stole jewelry and money. At noon, Fernanda went home as if nothing had happened, and Marco went to the market to buy oil with a macabre idea that you can already imagine. And around 2:30 in the afternoon, the killer couple met again.
They got into the van with Maria's body in the trunk and headed to
Manchay Bajo, about 17 kilometers from La Molina, where they dumped the body, poured oil over it, and without stopping for a single second to think about what they were doing, Marco set his own blood, his own mother, on fire. When Marco's father arrived home and couldn't find his wife anywhere, he tried to reach her on her cell phone without success. He quickly alerted the authorities, thinking that perhaps something had happened to her while she was out on the street, obviously unaware that his own son was the culprit. After hours of uncertainty, early the next day, her body was found in a huaca, completely charred and smelling of fuel. No one suspected her own son was responsible. Unbeknownst to him, the autopsy revealed a horrifying truth. Maria Rosa Castillo Gonzalez, who was 54 years old at the time, was still alive when she was burned. Maria Castillo, a prosperous businesswoman known in her city as the Queen of Bakeries, met the most horrible end at the hands of her son. A horrible end that a mother cannot imagine, especially coming from her own son. Although at first Marco even publicly lamented his mother's disappearance, 6 days after her murder, he could no longer bear his lie and confessed his crime to the police officers. According to what he told the police, he took his mother's life in the family home and then, together with his then-girlfriend, Fernanda Lora, they incinerated the body. With this confession, the authorities arrested the young woman as his accomplice, and the Second Provincial Mixed Criminal Prosecutor's Office of La Molina charged Marco Arenas Castillo with the crime of parricide, while Lora was accused of real concealment and complicity.
I trust her. I trust that she wouldn't be capable because she's human.
The teenager, affected, assured that from the beginning of the relationship, Fernanda Lora suddenly distanced herself from her group of friends and believes that her participation in the crime would have been under threats.
Thus, on the 13th of November of the year 2013, Marcos Arena was admitted to the Piedras Gordas Penitentiary Center. On the other hand, Fernanda was interned in the Corrillos Women's Prison until the trial against her began. Although Fernanda's defense attorney tried to have his client go through the judicial process in freedom and with her family, this was denied.
This young man had a very strong character. The few times I've seen him, I saw him being too demanding. He had her all submissive. She didn't know what to do, poor thing.
This Wednesday, her closest circle will meet at the Christ the Reconciler parish to pray for her prompt release.
The 29th of May of 2015, 2 years after the murder, the oral trial against Marco Arenas Castillo and Fernanda Lora Paz began, accused as the author and accomplice respectively of the death of Maria Rosa Castillo Gonzalez. Marco Arenas Castillo was accused as the author of the crime against life, body, and health in the form of parricide, while Fernanda Lora Paz was accused as an accomplice of the same crime. The public ministry requested that a sentence of 35 years in prison be imposed and that both make a payment of 200,000 new sols, about $53,362 as a concept of civil reparation.
She's working in those 2 craft workshops. She's preparing Christmas decorations. She's playing basketball, volleyball, and also me. She told me she was going to start going to the gym.
Fernanda is in prison, accused of being an accomplice to her ex-boyfriend Marco Arenas in the murder of businesswoman Maria Castillo. While the prosecution was asking for 35 years in prison for the crime of parricide, there was an unexpected twist in the middle of the trial, worthy of a dramatic soap opera. Marco Arenas's biological mother, Isabel Garcia Bobadilla, 50 years old, appeared. She had given her son to the Arenas Castillo family when he was just a newborn because she couldn't support him, not knowing that 22 years later, her son would become a murderer. But Garcia Bobadilla, who was a street vendor and lived in a high area of Villa Maria del Triunfo, assured that she was willing to take the deoxyribonucleic acid test to recognize her son, and in this way his sentence would be reduced. In the trial, she also gave more details about her story and said that she gave her son, who was only a month old, to his adoptive father, whom she met when she went to wash clothes at his residence in La Molina. At that time, the biological mother already had 2 small children and had neither a house nor food for one more mouth. So at the time of the trial, the woman was living with her 4 children in a prefabricated house. And so they had to spend several days of tension and uncertainty until the deoxyribonucleic acid experts who performed the blood extraction on Isabel Garcia Bobadilla and Marco Arenas Castillo informed the judges, the witnesses, and everyone present that the test came out positive with a 99.99% probability. With this unexpected revelation, by the way, for justice, the criminal's defense requested that the crime of parricide be dismissed and that he be judged for the crime simply of homicide, which would notably reduce the sentence. On the other hand, Seba Paz, mother of Fernanda Lora, assured that her daughter acted under threat from her partner. She considered that her daughter's only crime had been not reporting her partner, whom she fell madly in love with, leading her into a spiral of crime and violence from which she could not escape. According to her mother, Fernanda was afraid of her partner and for that reason obeyed each and every one of his orders. In other words, they wanted to wash their hands and not fulfill the punishment they deserved.
Fernanda has always been a cheerful, jovial girl, as you have seen, and Marco was a somewhat more repressed boy. So I don't think Fer definitely didn't raise a person with those feelings.
For Humberto Abanto, the young woman's lawyer, the crime his client had committed was that of concealment, which constitutes a light penalty of 2 to 4 years in prison. However, little by little more details of the macabre murder of the businesswoman were known that left Fernanda in a very bad position because it turned out that after the macabre crime, the couple danced in a reggaeton class and even tattooed their names on their arms to show their love and culminate their complicity in the crime. The couple had taken dance classes, as I tell you, in a place in La Molina where they went as if nothing had happened, as if they had not burned their mother alive just a few hours before a human being. According to witnesses of the events, the young people danced and laughed with total normality.
I realized that she no longer saw her friends, and that was very strange because she has always been very friendly, and that was what I did not like. And also that she closed her Facebook and stopped spending a lot of time with my second daughter.
So the main witness was the dance teacher, identified as Heriberto Redondo Garcia, who said he communicated with Arenas the day after the events, and he cynically told him that he would not be able to attend the classes because he was worried about his mother's disappearance. So, when it was Marco Gabriel Arenas Castillo's turn to speak at the trial, he confessed that he would rather see Fernanda Lora Paz go to jail than to see her free and in the arms of another man while he was in prison. The young man said that both were equally guilty of his mother's murder and that the young woman's defense was lying about the threats. For her part, Fernanda, who broke down in tears at the trial, reiterated that the young man threatened to kill her mother and her 5-year-old sister if she did not help him hide Maria's body, supposedly.
Both prisoners, during the course.
Throughout the entire trial, they accused each other. She's no murderer. She's not those ugly things they've said about her.
Both prisoners accused each other throughout the entire trial. Marco accused Fernanda of manipulating him into committing the crime and claimed that his ex-partner opened a bank account with money he took a day after the crime. However, Fernanda's defense attorney denied that his client opened that account of her own free will, but rather it was further proof of how manipulated she was by her partner. According to Fernanda, after the crime, Marco gave her about 1,500 soles, $400, opened an account, but kept the access and cards, showing his control over her. On the other hand, at the trial, Fernanda was accused of having sent a series of text messages on the same day of the events that could incriminate her in the planning of the crime. However, the lawyer denied that such messages existed. And there is none from the
27th of October of the year 2013 at 9:38 until the 11th of November, there is no message
of text. After a long trial in which they blamed each other, Marco Arenas and Fernanda Lora could not escape their fate and were finally sentenced to 20 years in prison for burning a woman alive. But not just any woman, but Marco's own mother, a boy who had all the purchasing power, the support and love of his parents, and yet decided to give the most painful end to his own adoptive mother. According to the sentence, Marco murdered his mother with premeditation and treachery as only a psychopath could do. In addition to the years in prison, he was sentenced to pay 200,000 soles, which is about $53,000 in civil reparations, as was foreseen from the beginning by the prosecution. And that's how the crime of Maria Castillo shocked and horrified an entire country. Currently, both criminals are in prison where they will spend a large part of their life. Both will be getting out on November 12th of the year 2033, when Marco will be 42 years old and Fernanda 38. Which in the same way, even though they are many years, still feels very little for two people who committed a total atrocity, one of the worst crimes that someone can commit. It won't be long before they are released and can rebuild their lives, and who knows, even have their own family. But the question here is, will they be able to realize the gravity of their actions at that moment? We will probably never know this. The murder also sparked outrage in many people, as it is not an isolated case. This was added to other cases like that of Juliana Lamoja, a Peruvian law student who murdered her mother with 65 stabs in her home in 2005. In 2006, Peruvian siblings Eva and Ariel Pfeffer strangled their mother, serving as another example. In all these cases, there is a pattern that repeats itself, killing the parents. Apparently, for parricides, it's a kind of, let's say, act of liberation against repressive, abusive, and cruel parents. In most cases, not all, of course. According to professional estimates, these types of crimes are an extreme way of saying enough to years of silently enduring gestures, words, and acts of submission and domination by their parents. But what scars remain in the mind and personality of those who take a life? Do they really feel guilt? Can they return to society and lead a normal life? I don't think so.
But I'm not a specialist.
The lady has not had the strength to be able to implement her rules and regulations within the home. The upbringing she has given her son has perhaps been more overprotective and permissive. The one who has practically had control of the home has been the son.
These types of murderers or parricides are people who have been very dominated for a long time and who end up killing because one day they explode in a huge load of emotion. It can also happen in children who see how the father mistreats the mother until one day, fed up, they take their life in a kind of revenge.
In what case have you never been in love? When you're in love, do you always want to be with that person?
Did he make a mistake? Did he make a mistake?
Was he scared? Do you know what it must be like to see the love of your life, with whom you thought you were going to start a family, have children, killing his mother?
Remember that on Pepe Misterio's YouTube channel, you can find the podcasts or interviews. Type Pepe Misterio Podcast in the search bar and the playlist will appear at the top.